Welcome back to the Better by Nature podcast, where we are talking with folks who have inspiring stories of overcoming adversity by relying on natural remedies. In this episode, I'm talking with Parker Olson, founder of Forij. Parker set out to discover new ways to feel better and live better when he discovered the benefits of mushrooms. Before he knew it, he was living out of a van, driving around the country to build a brand called Forij. Before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Life Leaf Remedies. At Life Leaf Remedies, we are passionate about making natural remedies that will help you feel better today. If you're passionate about natural remedies to take care of yourself and your loved ones, then check us out at lifeleafremedies.com today. Now, I hope you'll enjoy this episode of the Better by Nature podcast and feel better today, y'all. Welcome back to the Better by Nature podcast. Today, I am joined by Parker Olson, the founder of Forij. It is Forij, right? I'm not saying that wrong. It is Forij. I'm very, very excited. Parker, I've connected with you on LinkedIn, but also, as entrepreneurs and a fellow founder, I have a great respect for how you've been building this brand, what products you have out there and kind of what you're accomplishing with them. Very, very excited. I think all of that falls perfectly under what we try to talk about on this podcast, which is natural remedies and how natural remedies are helping people out there just enrich their lives, replace some of the bad with good, and just start living better. And our motto is just feel better today. We can't promise a lot of things, but man, I am out to help people feel better today. And I feel like you are too, man. Just from some of the things that I've seen you do. But please take a second to introduce yourself, man.
Yeah, well, appreciate it. Stoked to be here. It's funny how, it's like I feel like half my friends are from LinkedIn these days. So that's cool. But yeah, I'm the founder of Forij. We make functional food products. Functional food products, how we sort of define that internally is by basically taking ingredients that can act as natural remedies or have medicinal properties and putting them in everyday foods that taste really good or whole food ingredient, low sugar. So the idea is that you can help people get these ingredients into their diets really seamlessly and help them kind of address maybe it's different health concerns or different sort of different maybe aspects of health that they're focused on. So our flagship line of products is a functional granola, and we really focus on delivering different sort of mushrooms within this granola, which sounds really weird at first, but you can't taste them. They're ground up into powders. We use extracts, and the mushrooms that we focus on using are really good for cognition. They essentially provide essential brain nutrients. And so the two mushrooms we use in all of our products right now is a vitamin D brown button mushroom. So this is actually a proprietary mushroom strain developed by the leading global mushroom strain developer, Monterey Mushrooms. We have a partnership with them. Right. So it's kind of a unique product. Fun fact about them is that if you go to the grocery store and you buy a brown button mushroom, they invented that strain and they're likely to have produced it globally. It doesn't matter where you are. Wow. So that's pretty cool. Wow. And then we also use a really potent 8-to-1 lion's mane extract. And that really is actually just like enabling your brain cells to grow. And so it's sort of this combination of this like potent bioavailable vitamin D from this brown button mushroom and the synthesization or the synthesis of what's referred to as neurogrowth factor in the brain, which is what lion's mane really helps do. And neurogrowth factor is actually like what your brain cells are feeding on to grow and prune, and ultimately like it enables what's referred to in scientific terms as plasticity. So it's really like the ability of your brain structure to grow and change. So there's all sorts of really cool scientific studies, and I've been in on mushrooms for a while, so the ability to start a company to help get them into people's diets has been really exciting. So yeah, I know you've seen some random stuff I do on LinkedIn to help bring joy to others' world and promote the brand. But also on top of that, and I don't know, we don't have to go here, but I just think it's worth noting is I also serve as like I'm a certified psilocybin peer supporter. So people who are interested in using psilocybin which is a psychedelic mushroom for medicinal purposes. Maybe it's, they're suffering from anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll actually like sit with people and help them get prepared for trips and just make them feel comfortable and helping them, basically use these remedies, these natural remedies in a safe manner. So that's also kind of cool, more of like a personal project on my side though.
Awesome. Awesome, man. No, all of those things, natural remedies, right on the head. And you said a lot of really, dense things there.
Yeah, sorry.
I know, and I want to unpack some of it, man, because I too have been keeping up with mushrooms, and we actually have cordyceps in our immune armor capsule products. So we are trying to incorporate more mushrooms into some of the things that we're doing. Got a couple things that we're trying to develop too with those. But, and I also try to take, some mushroom products. So like you said, lion's mane, that's one thing that I try to incorporate in my diet. And I just wanted to get back there and unpack that a little bit because, while you did get into the science of it, like what is it that you discovered, that these things did for you personally? Like you had to have felt some of those things in your own life, right?
Totally. So, so I'm from the East Coast, and whatever that means to anybody. But growing up, I was never really exposed or didn't really believe in like natural remedies in general. And it was probably more of less of an exposure. And then I moved to Seattle, after graduating college, and the only thing I knew about Seattle was that Seattle is weird. And so I decided I'd start getting into weird stuff. And part of that was I noticed all these local apothecaries, and I straight up I did not know apothecaries were real. I thought they were where like witches were brewing stuff, and they like went out of business in like medieval times. And so I was like, man, this would be really fun to do. This is something weird. I'm gonna go check this out. And so I signed up to go to like a class on adaptogens and tonics. And adaptogens has kind of become a buzzword.
Yeah.
And I just had no idea what it meant, and was like, this will be interesting. So I went. And, they opened up the class by doing like a tongue reading. It was super funky. And I was like, man, like,
Whoa.
I was like, this stuff is way out in left field. Like, I was almost, I was kind of like, just, it was sort of fascinating just to be there. And when we got there, they served a tea. And the tea, I later found out, was like a reishi tea. Reishi is a functional mushroom, a medicinal mushroom. And she didn't say anything about it. She's like, oh, it's a reishi tea. And, I'm sitting there, okay, I'll have some tea. I don't know what reishi is. And about 10, 15 minutes after I started consuming the tea, I just got like really calm.
All right.
Like it was just like a natural, like almost muscle relax. And like I just felt so calm and like I wasn't tired. I had very like calm energy. Like I was very focused and like intent and in the moment. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, man, I don't know. I like noted it. I was like, man, I feel really good. I'm not super sure why. And then later in the class, she reviews the tea and she's like, hey, like, I don't know if anybody, has sensed this, but the tea is supposed to have like a really nice calming effect. And I was like, no shit. That's super cool. And so
Nice.
that was the first time for me where I'm like, man, like there may be a whole world here in natural remedies that I've just been ignoring for my entire life. And
Yeah.
from then on, I got really into like, I was making my own teas and I started mushroom foraging and I was trying other natural remedies. And then I ended up spending 18 months where for every single month, so for 30 days at a time, I would try a different nutritional regimen and I would document how I felt. So for 30 days, I was vegan. And then for 30 days, I was keto and then gluten free and Whole30. And I did the carnivore diet, vegetarian, pescatarian.
Wow.
Like I went through the plethora and then I kind of ran out of like standard diets to work on. And so one of the months I was like, cool, I'm going to just supplement with all these mushrooms and I'm going to get off of like all of their supplementation, all caffeine, and like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And that month was the most beneficial month I had out of the 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That says something. I mean, now the first question that comes to mind for me when you're going through all those other diets that you're trying was there any situation where 30 days wasn't necessarily enough to get
Great
the
question.
experience?
I found that on average it was 16 to 21 days was like right around the change mark. So it would take like 2 to 3
Okay.
weeks for me to be like, oh, I can sense that like I'm feeling good or I'm in it, right? The first two
Right.
weeks were usually pretty like tumultuous. Like I like didn't feel great or like I would have really wild swings in energy or I would have cravings. And then typically after that, like it was really like 14 to 16 days. Like 16 days was, I remember, kind of like the good day where it would
Okay.
shift over, and then I'd be like, okay, this is what it's like to be on, consuming this way.
Man.
So it's
That's
super interesting.
very interesting. I mean, and maybe even kind of a little insight to what you need to get through when you are shifting from one thing to another. Even if it's all right, I'm going to start doing something. All right, well, you might need a 2 to 3 week period there to let
Yep.
your body just kind of transition and let it suck for a little bit.
Totally, yeah,
Um,
and it's classic, right? I mean, I'm sure you know about it, and I'm sure it's, this is everybody, but it's like, oh, I want immediate
yeah.
results,
Oh yeah.
and people who try something and are already skeptical, and nothing happens in a day, they're like, all right, well, this isn't real.
Exactly.
Immediately sell it off.
Exactly.
So
Well, and we have that problem a lot within the CBD and hemp industry. It's supposed to be kind of a subtle effect. You're really not supposed to have that kind of instant impact, kind of punch like you might with, I don't know, a prescription or something like that. That's a little bit more clear. But I tell people all the time when I'm recommending try the products, give it 10 days. You got to get 10 consistent days, and if you don't notice a difference at the end of that 10th day, maybe it's not for you. Maybe there's a different way to go about it, but you definitely need that consistency to stick to it and get it in your system and your system adapted to whatever the changes you've just made.
totally,
So
and just a lot of people aren't. We're just us as humans and how we've evolved. I feel like a lot of us lack patience, myself
yeah,
included.
right here, for
So,
sure, man. Me too. Cool. Well, so tell me a little bit about from there. So you got to Seattle, you experienced mushrooms, and all right. So natural remedies aren't just kind of either hocus pocus or just not going to work for me. What made you then realize like, all right, I've got to start a business so that I can
yeah.
get this out?
Yeah, and a slight like piece of context, and maybe I should have provided this earlier, but I originally
Sure.
was pre-med in neuroscience. That was my like
Okay.
initial track in university. I still majored in neuroscience. I didn't go pre-med. I majored in neuroscience and entrepreneurship. So here we are.
Nice.
And so I in the a lot of the neuroscience courses I took, though, there was a lot of it was focused on how substances interact with the brain and impact behavior. So I like had a decent understanding of like, okay, even how like nutrition like can impact brain structures and brain chemistry, which ultimately impacts behavior. So I
Right.
kind of had some underlying knowledge. But anyways, so yeah, I went through these 18 months and was like, okay, what were my takeaways? And at that point was like super sold on mushrooms. And
Yeah.
I don't, I talk a lot, especially with people that I'm close with, and I'll be like, man, I'm doing this thing. I'm so excited about it. You should try it. Like, I'll be giving away mushrooms and other things. And what I found was that a lot of people were just super skeptical. People when you say the word mushroom, often people either say, "Is this going to get me? Like, am I going to have a psychedelic trip? Is this going to get me high,
Right.
or is this going to kill me?" Or I don't like mushrooms. Mushrooms are disgusting. Like that is like
Yeah.
95% of the population. And so after getting that response so many times, in my mind, I'm like, okay, how, I have like a firm belief and I've seen the impact that these ingredients can have. How can you get these into people's diets? And so
Exactly.
similarly though to other people, like I was super excited about these mushrooms, but I was consuming them anyways, even though it like wasn't my favorite flavor. And so I'm like, man, maybe like how do I get them into my diet a little more easily than just like kind of taking a gross mushroom, drinking a gross like mushroom tea or something. And so I started experimenting with putting them in like my morning oatmeal and like trying to make I did like a snack mix once, and then I started kind of making different concepts, and then I would just like bring them into the office and I would just start handing them out and being like, "Hey, like I just made some granola. Like what do you think?" And like wasn't like, for close friends, was kind of just having them try it and see what was good.
Yeah.
So that was moving on, but it was for me, it was just like the sheer belief and understanding of being like mushrooms are scientifically proven to have all these benefits. I've experienced these benefits myself. On top of that, when you start doing some digging, like they are the oldest medicine known to man. Like
Yeah.
mushrooms are the oldest medicine. And so, there's just a lot of scientific research there, history there, for me, it was a matter of time before like consumers start to realize that. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how do we help consumers, get these into their diet? Because I know that it's going to be good for them.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just kind of messing around on concepts, doing it for myself, handing it out. And then I randomly met up with a friend at like a startup conference because he wanted to go. He was in sales, was trying to sell somebody, and it was nearby where I was living. And I was like, cool, I'll come meet with you. And then, you're at like happy hour and everyone's talking. And the first question everybody asks is, what are you working on? And
Of
I
course.
didn't have an answer. I was like, honestly, like nothing. But I felt compelled to have an answer. So I kind of willed it into existence. I was like, we're getting mushrooms into people's diets by like putting them in everyday snacks. And 8 out of 10 people were like, I don't know what you just said, and I really don't care. But there were a couple people who were like, now that is really compelling. Because like some
Interesting.
people were kind of early on the waves, and one of them was kind of like, I don't know, an angel investor who was attending the conference, and he's like, man, like you should send me your pitch deck. Like that's something I'd invest in. And I was like, okay. And then I kind of just like went back and
Guess I
was
need
like,
a pitch
well,
deck.
I was like, I don't know, this is kind of fun and exciting. So I went back and
Yeah.
like created a logo and I started trying to sell the product, and then that kind of just like spiraled out of control.
Wow.
So
Man, that is cool. That's one of those that you can't argue with. It's like this is just happening, man. I'm at this, and what a place to a startup conference where they're gonna put you into that elevator pitch situation.
yeah, it's
Um,
totally. You get asked all the time. People are like, well, how did you start a business? Or like, what should I do? And I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, it just happened, and then you just like you just follow the breadcrumbs, and then next thing I know, like 6 months later after this conversation, I have like 50-pound bags of oats in my bedroom, and I'm like sleeping outside in a tent, and like got rid of my bed to put up like storage racks to store ingredient. It was just like a nightmare. So.
just went after it, man. That is classic entrepreneurship right there.
Yeah.
But so, all right, then, the next step and this is where I became very fascinated with, just your story, kind of what you've been doing. You have taken a unique approach to building a brand. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say.
So, I see how this kind of snowballed into from passion to concept that is, you just can't argue with it. Now you've got an investor saying, "Give me your pitch deck." So, well, all right, I need to send you a pitch deck for this thing.
Hmm.
But then, what was it that brought you to such a unique approach to brand building?
So okay, so this is in late 2019 because the investor approached me on my birthday, which was December 2nd, 2019.
Oh,
And then
cool.
in 2020 was like I got an LLC in early 2020. And then
Okay.
COVID hits in March of 2020.
Right.
And so when that's happening, I'm like, oh, okay, like I don't really know what to do. And so, I'm trying to figure out how to sell the product and where to sell it and what to price it at and what to actually make and doing branding. And I think, Miles, what you're referring to is I lived out of like a 1995 pop-up camper for a year. And
Yes.
it was branded in the Forage branding, and I drove around the
Right.
country. And part of what elicited that is like I was out selling product locally, but like it was just sort of hard to like gain any sort of traction. And then it was like, okay, like people just want to meet over email or just email them or over Zoom. And that got really old really quickly. And, email is really hard to reach people, especially during COVID when everyone's sending emails and no one's meeting in person. And so
Exactly.
as this is kind of all going on, like fast forward a year, we kind of spent a year like developing the product, kind of figuring out the branding. And then in early 2021 was when COVID restrictions were starting to get lifted, but I was still having trouble reaching like grocery store buyers and like trying to get the product in stores.
Right.
And we were just about to bring on like a relatively sized investor, and he built his entire business by like knocking on doors, like, the classic salesman guy. And
Yep.
I am definitely also like, I think I fall under that classic salesman guy type role, generally speaking. And so we're talking, and he's kind of like, well, like, what are you going to do to build a business? And I was like, I will literally go bang on doors. And he's like, what does that mean? And at this point, when I told him this, Miles, I had already been living outside in a tent for close to a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
And that's what I was referencing earlier, where I threw up my bed in my bedroom and was using it as storage for ingredient and like as our office. And I was sleeping in our backyard. I was like living with some roommates. We like were renting a townhouse. So I was like pretty privy to just like being on the road or just like being in pretty at bare minimum. And he's like, well, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I'll get in a car and I'll drive around the country and I'll bang on the doors. Like, that's what I'll do. And I kind of was like shooting from the hip, one could say. Like, I kind of was, I don't know if bullshitting is the right word, but I kind of was just like, I'll do it. Like, I don't know, like trying to get to yes, essentially. And like, I'm so shameless. Like, I'll do anything. Like, and for me, it's all just like a one grand life experience and something I'd love to touch on later, Miles. But is like, we talk about natural remedies and like, you can gain natural remedies from just like certain experiences. And so for me, like, I really enjoy like alternative experiences. Like, they just bring me a lot of joy.
Absolutely.
And so anyways, he's like, okay. And around that time, we had gotten kind of like an official warehouse space with another founder in Seattle. And he had just bought this like really cool Japanese import van and got it branded and wrapped. And it was pretty affordable because the Japanese import vans, the wheels are on the right side. And so nobody like really wants to buy them because it's kind of strange. And so I'm thinking, and I go and I visit this importer, and there are these pop-up camper vans where it's like you hit a button and like the roof comes up and you can crawl up top and you can sleep up top. And I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect. So I went out, got pictures of it, got it like kind of mocked up and wrapped, and I sent it to the investor and was like, this is what I'm going to buy and drive around and live out of until we like get into grocery stores. And he's like, okay. He's like, cool. And then he like wrote us this check. We like bought this van, got it wrapped in all of our branding, and it's a 1995. Like, this is a vintage vehicle. This thing's older than I am. And basically like hopped in there and hit the road. And around that time, we also like, I had started conversations with different kind of distributors and different retailers, and I would tell them, and I would send them like unique messages being like in emails in the subject line, all caps, like, am driving 2,500 miles to meet you on this day. Like, have 10 minutes. And I would just follow up. And then these buyers were like, who are you? And I was like, I'm driving to you right now. And I would send them photos of like me with the van, like with a whiteboard. I'd like write their name and be like, hey, like, I'm coming for you.
I'm really doing this. Yeah.
And I did that, man. I went down to California, and then I went up through Colorado, like Midwest, East Coast, down all the way through Florida, and then all the way back to California, and then back up to Seattle. And And I like showed up at like the Natural Grocers headquarters like before they opened one day, and I knew all the buyers were coming in and like set up a little table like parked out front. I'd sleep in grocery store parking lots. Like, I'd sleep in headquarter parking lots. I spent many a cold night in the Midwest in like November. And then it just became like part of the story, and like these decision makers thought it was really cool and unique, and I was like, great, well, this is now an asset. And it's really just a matter of like, how long can I survive in the fan? And so I did it for, almost exactly like a year. And now I'm like off the road and like probably would never do it again. And like probably have some post-traumatic stress disorder that I'm like working through,
Wow, man, that is incredible. And it just, the whole story just kind of snowballs. It's like you went from this startup conference to being in a van for a year, without really a whole lot of decisions being made.
No, I'm like if I'm just hella shameless, like if it's like the crazier the better, right? Like there's so much noise in today's world, like you have to stand out. And so that's definitely how we think about marketing and meeting with consumers and getting yeses from the right decision makers. It's like, how is everybody else approaching this? And like, what can you do differently here?
Absolutely. No, I love that, man. And honestly, the industry that I'm in, I mean, that's where we are by necessity.
Totally.
And we can't advertise in certain ways, but also there's a lot of buyers who just won't even touch the industry right now. So there's a lot of good people fighting for, less ears and, fewer eyeballs, I guess. But you have to be different, and you have to do it in a creative way that resonates with people. I mean, one example that I bring up a lot when I'm talking about branding and folks who are doing it different right now, it's Liquid Death.
Totally.
And I ought to get them to start contributing to this podcast, because I think I've mentioned them on this podcast too many times at this point. But what they're doing is incredible. You know, they've just canned up water, and it's like, in this day, people who think that they have to come up with the next greatest invention, it's like, no, there's still new brands coming out here successfully selling you water. And they're doing it in the least conventional ways. I mean, I guess their founder said that. He's like, whatever, we thought about what we shouldn't do, and then we did it. It's like, yep, makes sense.
I like that a lot. And like how they've positioned themselves too is like it enables them to do anything. Like the crazier the better, and the edgier the better, and it's really fantastic. Anybody who's interested in marketing like needs to be following them.
Absolutely. Because it's a master class in not marketing, essentially. You know, don't do it directly. Don't go out there and then just invest in this standard ad or a standard taste test. Like that was a viral video floated around. But that's ultimately what is being rewarded. And it's not being rewarded by, you know, some person that, you know, singular being that's like, this is the way now. It's being rewarded by the consumers. The consumers are the ones responding to these things, saying that's real. I'm going to go with that over these copy and paste versions of things that we've seen so many times.
It's really cool.
So, and that's exactly why you stood out, and I've enjoyed following you on LinkedIn so much, and just kind of taking insights from your journeys and the things that you've learned. I mean, one question that I like to ask on this podcast on a regular basis is, you know, we talk about overcoming adversity. Was there one moment or one kind of story where your back was against the wall and, you know, you just didn't know how you were going to fight your way out and take a step forward?
Man, all the time. Probably the best one though was, so I was in the van. I was driving from Florida back to California, I suppose, and the van like broke down, essentially, in like middle of New Mexico, and I was like, I could see the border with Mexico. And I was in like small town, middle of nowhere, and I just like didn't know how I was going to get out of there. And at the same time, like we were probably within like a week or two of solvency or insolvency, of just like having $0 in the bank. And I was just like, and I'm like, I like need to like care for my own like personal well-being. And then on the same time, like the business is about to fail. And then on the same time, like my brother and I parted ways, and he used to work with us, and like that was just like a whole other thing. And I just like was pretty close to just being like, I'm so over this, and just want to like, one second, bless me, and just, you know, you're like, you're just screaming, you know, you're just strangled by the scenario, and you know, like there's so much to be overwhelmed by that I get like chronic like you're almost like chronically unproductive. You like can't start working on anything because there's too much to like address, and you're just like, I don't even know what to do. And I'm like, now I'm rattled that I'm like wasting time and not even working on like making a solution for this. So that was definitely like the most challenging time, and I like strongly considered being like, dude, this is gonna fail, and like you're gonna have to like figure out what to do, and like maybe I'll just like leave America for a year. Like I don't even know. I was just like, I don't even know what to do. And, you know, you just got to take it like hour by hour, day by day, and just be like, all right, like, how am I getting to the next hour? How am I getting to tomorrow? You know, like, what's happening tomorrow? And then you get there and you're like, all right, what's happening the next day? And you figure it out, like, somehow, like, figured out the van. Like, there was like a random filter issue, and I fixed that. And then we got, like, kind of won some big business, and that was great. And it's just like, scared money doesn't make money, and like you just have to you just can't operate out of a place of fear ever on anything. So it was pretty, I feel like I like blacked out during that time in my life, you know.
Man, I've absolutely felt that. I mean, I wasn't broken down in the middle of New Mexico by the border, but the feelings that you described there, certainly I've already kind of been back against the wall at some points with LifeLeaf, and it is crippling in some ways, where you get to that point and there's too much to do and you don't know what to do first, and you just kind of shut down. But it's really neat that you're echoing a lot of what other folks have said, and whether they're you know, entrepreneurs or otherwise, just anybody through all walks of life that we've talked to. when you get to that point, it's crushing, but the only thing you can do is take a step forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the only thing you can do is like, I have to go forward now. I have to take this next step or get to this next hour or get to this next day. I don't have a choice, right? So there's always, it seems, that moment for folks that are in these positions where we're out here, you know, either in entrepreneurship, like I said, or just in any kind of extreme situation that life throws at us. There's so many of them to bring up. So from there, I mean, what is it that you held on to in that moment? You know, it sounded like a lot of stuff was really falling down around you, man. Like, what was it? Is it really the passion that you cling to for what you were doing at that point? Did you question that?
I don't know. I think it's more of yes, it's always there. For me, like, you talk about natural remedies, and I'll challenge this. Like, I think that there's natural remedies that exist that you don't have to consume. So, like, something,
I agree.
like, if I'm ever super rattled in any facet, like I'm just hella overwhelmed or like really anxious about something, or just like I'm like, oh my God, everything's a nightmare. The number one natural remedy, like I know if I do, like I will feel 1,000 times better, is simply like getting all of like my thoughts and to-dos out of my head and onto a piece of paper and then organizing them. Like there's something about just getting everything that you need to do or are stressed about and putting out a piece of paper and then organizing it and then being able to look at it all and be like, okay, here everything is, like you feel confident that like everything's right there. And then you can be like, what is the first step forward?
Just march down.
And so for me, like, I have like a OneNote. I wish I could share my screen and even like show this, like, and I'll like write down everything in this big list and then I'll organize it and then I'll pull in like, what do I need to do by the end of this week? And then I pull all those into a separate row, and then whatever I need to do by the end of the day, I highlight in a certain color. And then that is like, okay, let's start with this first thing. Yeah. And let's move. And so for me, like that is like one of the most valuable, like natural remedies I've discovered and has really helped me like along the journey. Like every time like shit really feels bad, I'm like, all right, I need to like go write everything down that's in my head and like take a look at everything and then start with one thing. That's it. Like for me every time.
Right on, man. I have absolutely felt that before, and I've got notebooks upon notebooks as proof of it.
Yeah.
No, and that's, I love that you bring that up because, we talk about natural remedies a lot too. And I think, obviously you and I are both heavily involved in natural remedies that we're passionate about. But one thing that I try to drive home is natural remedies certainly don't always come packaged in a box or cost you $1. There's a lot of things that people can be doing that are natural remedies, whether it's drinking more water or, go for a walk, breathe oxygen, go for a run if you can. Stretching is something that's huge. As in my family, anybody who's close to me and starts griping about something that hurts, the first thing they know that's coming out of my mouth, well, have you stretched lately? And they don't even want to hear it
Love
anymore.
that. Yeah, health, right?
So
the other thing that like I think is super powerful is like first of all understanding and figuring out like what genuinely brings you joy. Like
absolutely.
Like what do you like doing, or what are like the things think about the last time where like you were like, man, I was super happy, and like why were you happy? And then like like making sure like you're doing those things on a normal basis to like bring yourself joy, right? To like it's a remedy in and of itself to be like a mental health remedy to be like, okay, like for myself, like I really like cooking. We have like a really nice wok burner at my house where I live. Like I just love like experimenting on the wok. Like that brings me so much joy where it's like, okay, if I've had like a really hard day or week, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go cook on the wok. And that's just what I'm going to do because I know it will bring me happiness. But so that's the other one where it sounds so simple, but like, what do you like to do? And like, how can you make more time for it?
Yes. No, 100%. And even people that you feel like, look, I got 2 kids and a beautiful wife, startup company. Like there's all sorts of stuff. My time is not my own ever anymore, right? But even last night I think it was between 1 and 2 a.m., I darted out and I ripped off 5 miles.
Nice,
and,
dude. Love that.
It's But it's one of those things. And thanks. I'm a runner. I love
I do
running.
too.
But it's the same thing. It's like, man, if my back is against the wall, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. I am better off going off and getting a run in than I am just going to bed. Because if I just go to bed, I'm not resolving anything. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But if I go out and I run, I'm going to resolve a few things. I may not resolve all of it, but some of it's going to get resolved out there. I'm going to be able to blow off some of that steam, and I'm going to rest better, and then I'm going to wake up better,
Hmm.
and be able to attack things a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, is there something that you do that people are like, man, you're kind of crazy? Why do you do
Dude,
that?
first of all, I love that you said that. If I'm like, well, so sometimes like the anxiety and the overwhelmment, right? It's like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and your mind's just racing. You're like, oh my God. Like,
Yes.
I don't know what to do, but I can't go back to bed. But my favorite thing to do is to go out, and I love biking. I'll get out on the bike
There
at
you
like
go.
3 in the morning. And sometimes I'll rip
Yes.
like a pretty intense bike, and I get back and it's like 4:30, and you're like just feeling so good. You're like all the endorphins are flowing. But I do the exact same thing. I like to do cold plunges. Those
Yes.
those are two of the bigger ones for me. What else? I like, well, I really like creating. Like creative things for me
Mm-hmm.
are really fun. So I like, just like, it could be anything. Like it could be cooking, it could be drawing, it could be building, crafting. So I do all sorts of kind of random things like that as well. So I don't know. They're just like the things that bring me joy. Where I'm like, okay, I know if I'm really in it, I gotta go do one of these things. But I'm training for a half Ironman, so I've run and
Right
bike,
on.
and I've been rowing a lot recently. But I work out probably like 6 days a week, and it brings me a lot of stability.
It's huge. It's huge, and I think that there's too many people who try to say I don't have time for that. It's like, man, you don't have time to not have time for
Hmm.
that. You need these things. I'm guilty of it, right? Like I'll go a few
We all
days and
are.
not run, and I'll tell myself I have to do this instead. But as soon as I get out there and run it off, it gives me energy. It doesn't take energy from me. I'll tell you that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to talk about things like this because there are so many people out there wrestling with a lot of these challenges on a daily basis, whether it's time management, whether it's what's going through my diet or extreme circumstances that I'm up against. It's great to hear people like yourself that you thrust yourself into some wild circumstances, man, and you learned a lot and grew a lot out of it. And it's really important, I think, for people to hear those types of stories because they can get inspiration from that. And when their back is against the wall, they can be like, all right, well, I've heard some wild things about what other people have been able to come back from. I can handle my own right now and take my step forward.
Totally.
And that's what we're trying to accomplish on this podcast. So, I mean, one thing that I wanted to get in there for you is like, what is just some outward advice that you might have for people that maybe are either thinking about jumping into whether it be entrepreneurship or something that maybe is just intimidating to them, to say, hey, just go,
Hmm.
like kind of like what you did with the van.
There's a couple maybe pieces of advice I'll offer, but also a couple tactics that I think can
Sure.
be arguably more valuable. But like the number one piece of advice, and I'll say it, and probably nobody will really listen to it, but I think you reflect on it often, and a lot of people do, and are like, oh, that's super true. But it's like you're genuinely stronger than you think you are in like every facet. Like you would just be
Yes.
surprised at like what your brain in terms of like behavior can, what sort of scenarios they can help you get through, but also like what your body from a physicality standpoint can go through. And until you start pushing those limits, you won't actually believe it. So like I did my first like full Ironman a year and a half ago now, and like when I signed up for that, it was a bananas thing to think about. I was like, I'm so afraid of this, but I'm just going to sign up, and like once I've signed up, like I have to do it. And so
Nice.
I
Yes, that's the way to
I
do
I
it.
pressure myself where it's like I'll commit to things where I'm terrified, but once you commit, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to do it now. And so for me, it was like going through the Ironman was one of the first times where I finished that race and was like, I don't feel super bad. I like feel kind of good actually. And I was like, was an egregious race. And then you start thinking, okay, like what else is possible that I've previously believed is
Yeah.
not possible? And so I've almost become like addicted to these like things where you're like, no way. And then you do it and you're like, holy shit, that was awesome. So for
Yes.
me, that's like, I find a lot of joy out of like pushing my boundaries in that sense. Tactically, the strategy I deploy is I will tell people I'm going to do something to make it real. Where I'm like, I'm thinking about doing
Yep.
this, or I'm going to do this, and people are like, really? And I'm like, yep. And like, I'm kind of lying, like I'm kind of fabricating. But the more people I tell, then like the more obliged I'll
Gotta do
feel
it.
to actually do it. Or people are like, you didn't do it, like you're a liar. And like for me, like that's enough to like push me over the edge. So like I'm trying to think right now.
Absolutely.
There's been certain things I've been talking about doing just to like just to will it into existence for myself. Like it's like a self it's like a it's like a self-fulfilling mechanism that I do that I find to be really
Yeah.
valuable. If you really want to do something but you're really terrified, just tell other people you're going to do it, and then it may force the matter.
Well, yeah. Or you'll just stop telling people like, maybe never
Yeah.
not. I'm not gonna do that. Never mind. No, dude, same thing. I've done the same thing with Tough Mudders.
Cool.
Have you ever run a
I
Tough
have no.
Mudder?
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, no, they're a lot of fun. I gotta say. But this year it's kind of funny. I kind of feel like the universe has put one of these back against the wall decisions on me because the world's toughest mudder is one that I've always kind of, or at least the last few years, I'm like, man, I bet I could do that. Kind of want to try. And now it's right here in my backyard this year. I'm like, man, if I don't do it now,
Dude, hell yeah, you should get it.
no excuses now. So yeah, it's something. I've got a buddy who we've always done them together, and he and I, we're not getting any younger. So we're kind of like, look, man, if we're gonna do this, we might really need to do this.
Love that.
So I'm actually in that right now, like trying to convince myself to do it. That's why last night, it's getting cold. I'm down here in Fort Worth,
Okay,
Texas.
yeah.
We got a big old cold front coming
Oh,
through.
man.
But last night it was probably around freezing whenever I went out to run, and I'm just thinking like, if I'm going to run a tough mudder or world's toughest mudder, I'm going to have to do this. So just, it's kind of like jumping in a cold plunge. Once you do it, you don't regret it. It feels great, but
Totally.
getting there is tough.
Again, it's also back to like how you perceive yourself and like what your thought pattern is about yourself. Where like once you go and accomplish some of these things, like you start to believe in other things yourself, and then that impacts like how you behave and
Yeah.
what you can actually do. It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. Where like to the cold plunge thing, like I like tell my friends about it. Like I've been doing it for a long time, but like cold plunges still are horrible. Like they're
They're terrible
horrible
every single time.
But now that I've like built up this, like people are like, oh, like you do cold plunges, and like I do, and now that I like believe that and know that, there's something that like makes me stronger willed to go and do them.
Yeah. I'm
You
just
should
going to do it because this is part of what
you
I
should
do.
sign up for the race right now.
You're right. I should. Right. I should. Right
You
now.
should.
I should. I just go right on in and don't even give myself
can't even get in
an
out,
opportunity,
dude.
Man. No. I've got I've got Parker putting my back against the wall right now on the podcast.
Dude,
Accountability for days
Yeah.
here. I have to do it. All right. So my buddy's name is Dalton. Dalton, if you're watching this, we got to do it, man. We're gonna sign up for the world's toughest mudder. So
It's done.
Let's get ready. It's done.
It's over.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
So-
Well, look, Parker, I don't want to take too much of your afternoon, man. I know you are busy, and as am I. So, we're getting kind of close to where we want to wrap up here, but there is one story in particular that I believe I remember seeing a video of it. If maybe I'm making that up, I had to have read about it. But one of my favorite things that I will not be able to forget about you that I've seen on LinkedIn, you were in some type of a marina or some situation where you actually swam across a bay and gave somebody your snacks, right?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, yes, there's a video. Also, like slight disclaimer on that.
There is.
So I live on a floating home in Seattle.
Okay.
And so my office in the floating home, like maybe, I don't know, like 50, 40 yards outside of it is a public dock that's really popular in the summer. People come, they swim, they kayak. So I'm sitting there working, and I had the window open, and I heard someone say the word granola. And my eye, I'm kind of like, So I like pop up and I look out the window and I like see these people talking about it, and I'm kind of watching them, and then I see them pull out a bag of like Kind granola. And I yell out the window and I'm like, hold on. I'm like, I'm coming over. And if it's the summer, I'm wearing my bathing suit 24/7. I always keep it on. Like, and we
Right
live on the
on.
water. So it's just like, you always have it on. So I
Yeah.
quickly like run into my
Yeah.
kitchen, grab a bag, like jump in the water. And my roommate heard me yell out the window and is like upstairs and he's like kind of watching it all play out. So he starts recording. This wasn't like planned. So like Ron, I like jump in the water and I'm like swimming it over, like keeping it above water. And then they were like, what is going on? And they started recording it. And then I brought it over and was like, hey, like I have this local granola company. Like you can't be eating this kind. Like I got to tell you about my product. And I like, gave it to them. And then we got a good laugh and they ate it. And like they've actually come by since and been like, dude, that was super dope. We buy it from PCC. I was like, hell yeah. It's stuff like that too that like I just
Man.
find joy in. Like that's almost more of like a
Oh yeah.
personal fun thing than it is like, oh, we got to promote our product all the time. Like, I don't know, it's just fun, man.
Yeah. No, you have to have fun with it. That's what people feed off of and enjoy. And I'm sure that totally stuck with those folks. I mean, like you said, they've come back to see you
Yeah.
again. There's no way they'll ever forget
Hmm.
that. But I love that, man. I love just your enthusiasm and your passion and what you're doing and the mission that you're on. I mean, you know, I want to give you a chance to kind of, I mean, speak to what you're trying to do with Forge, where you want to take
Sure.
it, where you want to go, and you know, just kind of give us an idea of your vision and you know, if we're gonna have another conversation with Parker, where do we expect to pick up with you, man?
Yeah. So right now we're building something pretty exciting, I actually think. So right now, like
Okay.
we have this granola line. It has essential brain nutrients in it, right? We're really focused on cognitive health. Um, but when you think about cognitive health and like, oh, like let's just say like, oh, you're someone who's interested in being like, oh, like I want to try and prevent dementia for as long as possible, or I'm interested in just like in putting my brain in the best place it can be to like be more productive or learn better or have better memory. What do I do? Like you Google it, and like there are just like four fundamental things to like, sort of like optimizing your cognition, right? And so it's like sleep and hydration. Shocker. And then the other two, it's like nutrition, which is kind of what we're doing right now. It's like whole food ingredients, low sugar, some of these essential brain nutrients that actually help with brain functionality. And the fourth one is exercise, and exercise is multifaceted. It's physical exercise and exertion, but it's also like stimulating your brain and brain exercise. So today, like we provide a food product that has essential brain nutrients, but we're trying to think about like how can we provide more of a holistic cognitive health solution. And so what we're building right now, and we're going to have our beta live in like 3 weeks. So I don't know when this is specifically airing, but probably in January sometime, is we're building like, and it initially will be like a 30-day challenge, 30-day program where you get 30 days worth of this granola to kind of eat it as like a breakfast. And then you get 30 daily mini games that we've actually been developing these like mini games with a PhD in neuroscience. And so the idea is like you play like this mini game each morning that gets texted to you at 7 a.m. each morning. And so you like play your game and you eat your forage for 30 days. And then like if you like your cognition hasn't improved, we'll give you your money back. Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome, man. That's that's another thing. Just I admire the strategy because you're finding ways to authentically engage with folks. It's not just some kind of like email reminder or some kind of cheesy thing. I mean, you've really thought through the entire experience. I mean, down to the actual game itself with a neuroscientist like that. That's really cool,
yeah.
man.
And like I said, like my background's in neuroscience, and like this is stuff I'm like super
Right.
passionate about. And I got really into neuroscience in high school. I took a course through MIT and was like all in. Like I was never a science kid, and then I was
Oh
like,
wow.
neuroscience is sick. And so for
Yeah.
me, it was like, the brain thing was like, or the brain game thing was something I knew about and I'd done a lot of preliminary research on. And then it was like, okay, like how do we legitimize this? And after I kind of pulled together all my research and like the direction, it was like, all right, let's pull in some people who are like really well versed in neuroscience and kind of get like some of their blessings and directions and like additional research and findings. And then let's start applying that. So like we'll launch a beta, which is just like there's kind of a standard brain game program, but then we're going to start doing more like personalized tracks based off what certain cognitive functions people are looking for. And so there's a lot more to come there. So we're definitely like pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's really neat, man. And so I guess you're not necessarily on a mission to just be in as many locations as you possibly can. You're really trying to connect with consumers and keep that as a part of your core strategy. Is that
Definitely.
true?
Hmm.
That's awesome, man. I love to see that. That's what we're trying to do too. And I think that we've got a very different path than you do, but certainly love watching what you're doing and that vision, just that plan alone. I can't wait to see how that goes. You're right. It'll probably drop sometime in January, early January. But yeah, man, I would love to have another conversation again in the future, see how some of this stuff went, see how you're, maybe in the middle of 23, how things are going, if there's anything, any kind of crazy adventures to update on.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your time today, man. I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you want to leave our guests with? Any final thoughts from Parker?
Just, drop me a line if you're interested in learning more, or check out Forage. And, I'm always open to chatting with people, especially people who are interested in learning more about mushrooms. I just appreciate the time. It was super fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. Love just getting to have a good time, chat about things we have in common, things we, passions we share, and hopefully other people can take something from it, and that's why we do it. But y'all check out forij.co, right? Forij.co.
That's right, forij.co.
There we go. And definitely try the granola. Have an open mind about the mushrooms. I'll tell you my personal experience with mushrooms. I do a mushroom tea every night with like lion's mane and some other things in it. Huge improvements in a lot of different things. It's not just energy, but just kind of feeling more balanced. So definitely have an open mind. And I haven't gotten to try Forage yet, but I'm going to. And I want to be able to tell people how delicious it is because I imagine that it is. But I promise you, last time I was at Walmart and I was looking at the granola, I was like, no. If I'm talking to Parker, I'm gonna get some Forage. I'm sticking with this guy. So I hope everybody else will do the same.
Yeah.
Man. But appreciate you and your time today, Parker. Keep up your passion, keep following it. The content you put out there is incredible. I hope that everybody will feel better today.
Oh yeah, brother.